Good evening and welcome to an evening of Race, Art, and Hope. I'm Danella Clark, the proud president of Boston Arts Academy Foundation, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here this evening at our virtual convening and conversation on three very important topics: race, art, and hope. I often say that life is a choice, and I certainly want to thank each and every one of you for choosing to spend some time with us this evening. I am particularly grateful to our panelists, the great Dr. Lee Pelton, who happens to be the chairman of Boston Arts Academy Foundation Board, Jeff Rosica, who is chairman and CEO of Avid Technologies and also a member of the Boston Arts Academy Foundation Board of Directors and also the chair of our marketing committee. And Valerie Becker-Nogueira, who is a Boston Arts Academy alumni, class of 2007, an Emerson College president, an Emerson College alum, and also the current chairwoman of the Boston Arts Academy Alumni Network Board. Thank all of you for joining us as panelists. I'd also like to thank and recognize Sandy Lish, who is our moderator for this evening. And Sandy, I really want to thank you and the Castle Group for really putting Boston Arts Academy on the map over these last few years. It's been an absolute pleasure to partner with you and Castle to really raising the visibility and profile of Boston Arts Academy. I would also like to thank the Boston Arts Academy Foundation staff. As I often say, none of us does anything by ourselves, and it takes a team to put together an event such as this. And I specifically want to shout out our fierce Director of Corporate Relations and Special Events, Ms. Susan Urbino. Susan, thank you so much for all of your hard work in making tonight possible. Boston Arts Academy Foundation supports the incredible work of Boston's only public high school for the visual and performing arts. It is now my pleasure to introduce my sister. She is my sister in service. This effort and this partnership is a labor of love for both of us. We get up every day with a fierce sense of urgency to support our talented artists, scholars, and citizens of Boston Arts Academy. It is now my pleasure to introduce our head of school, Ann Rogers-Clark. Thank you again for all joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Danella. Thank you so much to the Boston Arts Academy Foundation. We are so grateful for your support. And good evening to all of you. My name is Ann Clark, and I am the proud principal of Boston Arts Academy. As Danella said, Boston's only public high school for the visual and performing arts. Our mission at BAA is to serve as a laboratory and a beacon for artistic and academic innovation, preparing a diverse community of aspiring artist scholars to be successful in their college or professional careers and to be engaged members of a democratic society. Part of that mission is to prepare students to be artists, scholars, and global citizens. We give our students professional level training in the arts and opportunities to work with world-class artists. The artistic work you are about to see is an example of the kinds of artistic opportunities students have at Boston Arts Academy. Last school year, our high school film students, with the support of their teacher, John Adekije, did a year-long collaboration with the marketing communications company, Mullen Lowe. Together, they created a visual representation of the work of the Massachusetts Literary Education and Performance Collective. Our students worked alongside these amazing professionals at Mullen Lowe to direct and produce the project you're about to see. Please enjoy Nightstick, a visual poem that deals with police brutality from a young Black man's perspective.
From the point of view of the nightstick, I orchestrate brutality, but I never wanted to compose this symphony. We batons fell into the role masterfully, though, as the blue Beethovens adorned in badges used us to keep the beat on black notes. It's just that the syncopation of their screams was always the hardest to hear, as it ends and repeats. Voices crescendo in agony as we direct the masterpiece. We helped create a piece once, titled him Rodney. Reduced his life to 8 minutes of mutilation, but that song got old real quick. So we found new symphony halls wherever the bars kept black notes in place. See, it's hard to be a conductor for this symphony, especially when they treat us like color guard on parade, eager and willing to conduct the next tune. See, we batons, the color of midnight, turn black bodies into battered heaps. Now ain't that black on black crime? Are we just an officer's token black friend? Will he put us down the minute we look threatening too? We do our best to quell the rhythm of rebellion. We put rests on the voices of colored women so they can hear the same tired tune over and over again. They never seem to get a solo, only seen as a supplement to a black man's medley. The audience doesn't seem to like this piece anymore. America don't seem to like peace anymore. Black folk never wanted to be an admittance. Hell, we never even bought tickets, but we've been instrumental in this creation. Unplugged from society, all we wanted to do was make music. We never expected the dissonance of black instruments to create the best melody, yet keeping time on torture was something of a classical arrangement for us. Like leaving bodies to hang in the breeze like high notes. Like massacre is musical. So not for nothing we've turned murder into an artificial art form. Have masterminded the maiming of a people, and we couldn't have done it on our own because what's a baton without an officer? What's a conductor's wand without a maestro? What is a black body besides brutality composed by the boys in blue? See, he who holds my handle wishes I were a whip, misses the sound of its crack and decided to make music instead. But who am I to judge when I am cut from the same wood that decorates that whip's handle? See, we are tired of making songs out of suffering, of turning the altercations between my maestro and black folk into twisted duets. Remove me from his hand before the body count rises like chord progression. Pray this would see a finale soon, but for now, the show must go on. America always wants an encore.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you to all the students who contributed to that amazing piece of art. It is now my pleasure to once again introduce our moderator for this evening, Sandy Lish. Sandy is the co-founder of the Castle Group. She is a women-owned business. She serves on many boards, including the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce and a host of others. She is an award-winning leader in our community and just really the go-to person for public relations. And we are so fortunate at Boston Arts Academy and Boston Arts Academy Foundation to have her thoughtfulness, her guidance, and her direction with regard to strategy when it comes to elevating and amplifying the work of Boston Arts Academy. So again, Sandy, we thank you for the work that you do on our behalf with CASEL, and we thank you for joining us this evening as our esteemed moderator. Let the conversation begin.
All right. Thanks, Danella. Thanks, Anne. And I'm so excited to have this conversation tonight. It's really going to be something special. A couple of housekeeping things that I want to mention, because I know you really are here to hear Lee, Jeff, and Valerie. So I'm going to try to take as little time as possible. But if you have a question for the panelists, please go to the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen and ask the question there. Also, if you have an issue with technology, same thing, please ask the question there. And other than that, I am going to get us started. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited for this conversation. This has been a topic I'm sure that all of us are focused on in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and having this intersection of race, hope, and art together is just a perfect nexus, particularly when the conversation is being led by these three. So let me start with our three panelists, starting with Lee Pelton. Lee is the 12th president of Emerson College, and he is internationally known as a speaker and a writer on the value of liberal arts education, the importance of leadership development, civic engagement, and diversity in higher education. Excuse me. He's a well-respected thought and innovation leader. He's been recognized by countless organizations, including just this past summer, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, which honored him as a distinguished Bostonian of 2020. There's a racial justice grant in honor of Lee, the EOS Foundation, the Governor's Award, and the Humanities. This is a long list. I'm going to go as quickly as I can while still honoring Lee. Mass Humanities, and just last week was named to the Boston Business Journal's 50 most powerful leaders, and he was also named to Boston Magazine's list of 100 most influential people in Boston. He is also chair of the Boston Racial Equity Fund, and he serves on the board of directors for, long list, Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, where he's vice chair, WGBH, MIT, the Press Management Board, the Harvard Graduate School Alumni Council, Boston Arts Academy Foundation Chair, coincidentally, and the Boston Municipal Research Bureau, Facing History and Ourselves, and the Barr Foundation. So just a little bit about Lee, and you're going to hear a lot more from him, and I'm sure learn about him tonight. Excuse me. Jeff Rosica was appointed CEO of Avid in February of 2018. He joined Avid in 2013 as Senior Vice President of Worldwide Field Operations, excuse me, and later became Senior Vice President, Chief Sales and Marketing Officer. Jeff has more than 30 years of experience in broadcast, media, and entertainment technology with a variety of senior leadership roles for Thomson Grass Valley and Philips Electronics. He is also a Boston Arts Academy Foundation board member, and he chairs its marketing committee. And finally, Valerie Becker-Nogueira. Valerie is an experienced consultant specializing in marketing communications, client relations, and employee development. With more than 15 years working with client-focused and service-oriented businesses, she brings her organizational skill sets, creative talents, and knack for empowerment coaching to help artists and entrepreneurs grow their businesses and connect with clients meaningfully. Valerie is, no coincidence, a graduate of Boston Arts Academy, where she majored in dance, and then she earned a Bachelor of Science in Marketing Communications from Emerson College. So you can see how everyone's connected here, which makes us all friends and family. She currently serves as chair of the Boston Arts Academy Alumni Board and Network. She supports access to the arts and education for youth. And she's also the founder of VB Tribe, which if you'd like to check it out, it's vbtrybe.com, an online community engagement platform for millennial female empowerment. So with all of that, you know their credentials. And I'm going to start by asking a question to Lee and then the other panelists, and then we're going to bounce around a little bit. We'll have some different questions. We are going to stop and ask some of your questions in between the questions that we have prepared. So, and we have some more surprises for you along the way. But Lee, let me start with you, if I may. The film we just saw, produced by a Boston Arts Academy student, really brought to light a very heated issue in today's society that we are all talking about and has clearly sparked protests, debates, and even violence. You had a very powerful and personal response to George Floyd's murder. You wrote a letter that became very viral, even had Mark Cuban retweeting you. And you talked about the fact that America is on fire, and you made a call to action that each one of us needs to address racism in America. Do you feel we are at least beginning to heed that call to action? And what have you seen since your letter?
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, the purpose of that letter was to make the invisible visible. And in particular, I wanted to make clear that what happened to Mr. Floyd was not new. And it was part of a long-standing structural issue that we have in this country. And as I've said before, I am George Floyd. And I'm part of that lineage because I'm part of that history. And it was important for me to make him visible because it was his invisibility in the sense that he was not human that allowed a police officer to kneel on his neck for almost 8 minutes as he cried out for his mama and took his last breath. And so I wanted to humanize him. And as you said, you know, the letter went viral, as they say. 7 to 8 million people across the globe had access to it. Most of that thanks to Mark Cuban, but some others as well who tweeted it out. So I'm often asked, is this a moment or a movement? And I'm not prepared to say that it's a movement yet, but it feels different than a moment. And what's very striking about this phenomenon over the last several months is that its leadership is made up primarily by young people, some even as young as in high school, and who know how to harness social media. And they can bring together a social rally or protest, many of which I've participated in overnight, thousands of folks here and around the country. The other noticeable aspect of this almost movement is that it's multiracial. And you can see that in each and every event. So I am hopeful because it is young and it is multiracial and multicultural. And you know, while it's difficult to sustain the same kind of intensity that we've witnessed since his Mr. Floyd's murder for several months or years. In fact, that's impossible. But it's my belief and my hope that this cry for racial and social justice will be a leadership training program, as it were, for the next generation of leaders. And a lot of that will go unseen, but I'm convinced that the folks who've been involved in this and organizing it, young people, will in fact be powerful change agents in the future.
There's the hope piece coming right in, right off the bat. Thank you, Lee. Jeff, I'm going to turn to you next, and if you can unmute yourself, please. Race is difficult to talk about in the workplace. You're CEO of a successful technology company in the media and entertainment industry, which also is a very visible industry to all of us. So how is the industry overall addressing racism through media, and how can it improve? And I'm thinking about things like Oscars So White, and you know, how the media are covering, without getting, you know, too political into which media is which. I think we all know. You know, talk to us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, Ken, thanks, Sandy. And thank you, by the way, for having me. This is a great event, and really excited to be here and talking. And you know, as listening to Lee's background, I was like, yeah, boy. And then there's Jeff. So it's really nice to be sitting in the panel next to Lee. But look, I think that, you know, our industry, I'd say this, in media entertainment, my whole career has been in media and entertainment. I've been in the technology creation or creating technology for media and entertainment for my entire career. I actually started in the editing suite as a journalist. But I would say that the industry is probably farther along than a lot of industries. However, as some of the evidence you gave, we still have a lot more work to do as an industry. But I think what's good about media entertainment is that, look, it is an industry rooted in art. It is an industry that art is, you know, by default, you know, the creation of images and sounds and things. It's an artistic endeavor, and it's you know, it's a great place to be. I mean, look, I think that our vision as a company, our mission as a company is, and what we do is we enable storytellers to be able to inform, educate, enlighten, and entertain the world. And you know, the goal is, we think, and again, I'll address your question here, but I think in the long run, this is a good thing. I think it can help make the world a better place, because I think that, you know, change happens. Not only is art, I think, an important influence for society, and media is an important influence for society, it's also can drive social change, telling those stories, getting those stories out. Now, media is become very democratized, so anybody can get their story out. So obviously, there's bad comes along with the good. But I think that, you know, I think the industry's made a lot of progress. I think it's definitely an industry that is a lot more aware of the situation, and of course, you know, the artists bring a lot of that to the forefront in our industry. But we have a long way to go. I mean, I still think you go back to the corporation. Look, I think corporate leaders like myself have got to do more. We have got to step up. We've got to realize that what we're doing is not enough. We've got to do more. We've got to be not just have empathy for the situation, but actually help drive change, and the change that needs to happen. I do think, though, again, that I think our industry specifically, you know, a lot of bad comes with the good, but I do think that ultimately, you know, if people can get their story told or their art shown, I mean, again, I think wholeheartedly back to the theme of this subject is, look, I think art is, the hope I have, I'll come backwards at it. The hope I have is that art is going to help us really help move this into a movement. I agree with Lee. It's more than a moment, but maybe it's not quite a movement yet. Maybe we can use art and media to help make it a movement, and really make sure that word's getting out there, and that we're using our place in the industry to do that. And so, you know, I think generally as an industry, I think there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we are doing. We got to do more. I don't want to necessarily say what the Academy needs to do that's more of a Hollywood problem. But I think if you look at, you know, I think we made a lot of progress. And I think the good news is the industry is quick to realize its shortcomings. And I think the industry is quick to then make adjustments on what they're doing. So I think all industries need to do that. But again, as a company leader of a technology company, we've got to do more. I know for our own sake, how we can drive diversity, how we can drive more inclusion. I mean, that's an important goal for us. And it's a lot of work in the tech business, just because of, you know, we've got to really help young people be attracted to our industry, to our space. But no, I think media entertainment, again, has a lot more to do, but we have an important role to play. And I think that, I hope that in the end, the good will win over the bad in what media is bringing to the world, and hopefully can, you know, add in a good way to this conversation.
Thanks, Jeff. Speaking of adding in a good way, Valerie, question for you. We've seen, you know, if you think back even to the Obama campaign, iconic artwork, now even more so the iconic artwork about George Floyd, and all of it that we see murals and memes and all kinds of things that are really stunning and very important and powerful. What role do artists play, or should they play, in addressing racism? And do they mirror society, or do they influence society? Where's that line?
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really grateful to be here. I think artists are mediators, they're activists, they're professional agitators, as Tori Bullock says, right? We are called upon to help people process their feelings, emotions, events, and share history, right? And provoking messages about racism through art. They say art imitates life, right? And artists do act as a mirror for society while also influencing that dialogue. An example that you mentioned would be muralism, right? How art in a large public space can be shared and owned at the same time by an entire community. It's in your face. It forces people to talk about what they're seeing. And if you look at even here, what Lee Beard actually spearheaded in Nubian Square, right? The murals, the Black Lives Matter painted down Washington Street. Those are powerful images, you know, and here we are talking about it now. It's influencing this dialogue. And so to, you know, add on to Lee's points and Jeff's comments, I think these actions of art are actually moments in movement, right? In a movement. While movements are happening, I don't think people are conscious saying this is a movement. This is, you know, I don't know, something giving it a title. Their actions are actually, you know, making up the movement. So I have to think and say, you know, a lot of these moments, or what looks like a moment, is actually what makes this turn into a movement and what makes it a movement.
Thanks, Valerie. I'm going to get to one of our attendees' questions. And before I do, I just want to remind everyone there is a special book collection that we're giving away tonight. So you are entered for the drawing just by virtue of being here. And 3 books are by Martin Luther King Jr., The Radical King, Strength to Love, and Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community. And amazing to think that was not written today because it's very apt. And then plus Unseen, Unpublished Black History from the New York Times Photo Archives, and a book I'm sure you've all heard of, the #1 New York Times bestseller, How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, who's now a Bostonian. I'm going to go to the first question, and this comes from Sean. The City of Oakland has a cultural development plan that starts with diversity and inclusion. The spaces for studio artists in Oakland are limited to the Traditional Arts Museum with a curation that is very much in the European mold. They are attempting to create spaces to meet community and culture where they are, so that the art that emanates from the culture is showcased there. What should Boston be doing along these lines? And I'll open that up to all 3 of you, whoever would like to start. Public art, an opportunity to make it more accessible and representative in Boston. Thoughts?
Maybe I'll just start to say, look, I do think it's important. I think the point is very clear, and that's I've not been to see the Oakland environment, but I've read about it. Look, I think it's important, whether it's art, you know, or media or dance or anything, fashion. I think it's important that we do create environments that's possible. I mean, I look at, you know, even like the gallery that Boston Arts Academy has built. It's a great opportunity for young people to showcase their work. I do think it's important. You know, I wouldn't say I would take an opinion on Boston, other than I think Boston probably can take more of a position on this and create more of an environment. I think it's important that young people and you know, people of color and people in let's say areas that don't have the same advantages, they've got to have an ability to develop their art, to develop their storytelling skills, and you know, being able to showcase their work and to get feedback and to be able to also, as Sean said, to be able to, you know, impact the culture through the work that's coming from within that culture. I think it is important. I think, you know, the more we can do, and I think actually Boston Arts Academy does play a role in that, you know, at least for the young kids of Boston Arts Academy, they give them that ability to really showcase their work, as the work some of the work we saw earlier, and I think we're going to see some more later. But I think it is important. And again, I don't know the Oakland model real well, but I do think this is an important thing for us to help create this opportunity. Again, I'm passionate about, I know we're just in the media part of arts, but I'm passionate about what art and media does and how it can influence society and influence culture and drive change. And so I think the more visibility there is, the better for that.
Thank you, Jeff. Lee or Valerie, do you want to add anything to that? we have an important visual for you. So before we get into some additional questions, I want to share with you some visual art. You saw the performance art a few minutes ago. And this would not be a Boston Arts Academy Foundation event without showcasing the amazing work with the students, but it really speaks to what we're here to talk about. So if we could go to that visual. I want to know how you possibly decided what of the million pieces of art created by these students you could include in that short slideshow. It's really incredible, really powerful. And you can see the passion and the emotion and the intentionality and the opinion in those pieces. So I want to ask the panel, and I'll start with you, Lee. Looking at those pieces of art and thinking about the students at Boston Arts Academy, what does that tell us about what is hidden behind some of the students we see going in and out of classrooms every day? What needs to get out there, and what's the way to get that out there?
Yeah, well, let me talk about art generally. So when we go to museums, or we encounter art, wherever it may be, if we're in a museum, we're a customer, but we're also a product. And that's something distinctive about our engagement with cultural institutions or works of art, is that they are there to, we engage with that, and we become transformed in some way. And we know that storytelling is enormously powerful. It is transformative. Think about, all the speeches that one might go to, and what you really remember are not the words, you remember the stories. And so what we just saw there was another version of a story. Those are all stories, important stories to be told. And if we'd had more time, of course, we would have been able to engage more fully in each of those stories. So, art is transformative. And among its many roles, whether it's an activist role, or whether it is an engagement with something that's just beautiful, a poem, something that engages us emotionally or even intellectually, it is transformative, and all of that in one form or another is storytelling. And so what happens at BAA, of course, is that storytellers are nurtured in a variety of forms. Sometimes it's dance, sometimes it's music, sometimes it's poetry, or it's fiction, or whatever it might be. But it's all about storytelling. And the young people who leave Boston Arts Academy will leave with a more profound sense of their capacity for creativity, for collaboration, because many works of art, not all, require collaboration with others. So they'll leave with creativity, with collaboration. They will leave with capacity to think critically, that is to say, and engage the world in a very critical way. And all of them will leave BAA with the power to communicate through their art. And those four capacities of communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, you know, those are the capacities that the 21st century cannot get enough of. And those are the capacities that will take you everywhere and anywhere you want to go, and whatever the profession might be. And so that's why we have a number of students who graduate from, they may study dance, right, at BAA, but they come to schools like Emerson, and they end up as marketing and communication majors, and they go on to do something other than dance in a very, very profoundly successful way. So that is, you know, that's what's hidden, I think, at BAA, and its capacity to create young people of hope and promise. I'll just say this one other thing. Good citizens are the riches of cities. Good citizens are the riches of cities. And BAA produces good citizens. And these are people who go out into the world and they make a difference. And they contribute just remarkably to the world in which we live in a variety of venues, and using their enormous talents.
Thank you. So I think we were talking about Valerie, if I had to guess.
We were.
So I'll turn to Valerie for a moment. Valerie, you can talk about finding success in modern dance as a Latina and also creating a more inclusive community. Can you talk about what you've experienced specifically as a Latina in the field of modern dance, and how that shaped what you're doing now?
Sure, absolutely. You know, as a Latina, I immediately have flashbacks to when I first started dancing and exploring various styles. I quickly found out something like classical ballet was really rigid and discriminating, and knowing that I'm short and curvy and not the stereotypical ballerina image, you know, I went on to dance with other groups and companies that seem to be more inclusive and celebratory, right, of all types of people. And they offered various styles, which included modern dance, which we know was, which came from a rebellion actually against ballet, jazz, hip hop, Latin dancing. And, you know, where I'm going with this, I think historically, artists of color have always been, right, the facilitators of change. And I always look to that. I don't know if I guess my purpose would be to be that change, but I know I want to be that catalyst, right, for the change. So I think of all the dance companies, right, created and headed by Black and brown artists. They didn't just take a seat at the table, right? They had to build a new table. I think of, you know, good examples of that are the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, El Ballet Hispánico, even here, Danza Orgánica. And yet we still have well-established companies and institutions that for the majority of history in general have been Eurocentric. You know, one of the things I also think of as just a dancer and a Latina myself, can we highlight that it wasn't even until 2015 that Misty Copeland became the very first African-American woman promoted to principal dancer at the ABT, which has been around since 1939. So this was just 5 years ago. And there's still so much more work to be done. And so, you know, in calling, I guess, artists to be catalysts for change. I mean, they're not necessarily, you don't need to call upon them, right? They're already using their platforms, their creative outlets to amplify those important messages. I would probably turn it around and say, we probably need to call upon our allies and people in power to be the catalysts and actually address and make the changes regarding, you know, racial inequality and social injustices.
Thanks, Valerie. What about when art, and this, I guess I'll go to Jeff first for this question. What about when art in itself could be a contributor to racism? Art's subjective, and art has changed over the time. So it's, you know, we know about cancel culture. We know that what might have been acceptable in the past is not acceptable now. But so just this weekend, there were some statues in Portland that were toppled in protest. I think it was Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt. And, you know, are those statues art? Does art deserve to have a place, you know, forever? Does art need to be looked at not objectively, but subjectively when we're talking about race?
Yeah, I would think so. It's a good question. It's even for myself. I say when I see things on TV where people are toppling statues, I've had to even think to myself, like, where's the line, or what is the proper line? I think it has to be in context. I think what's important is any art, or in this case statues, which I'm not sure. I mean, they're art, but they weren't erected. A lot of those weren't erected for art reasons. But you know, I think it all has to be in context. I think, look, you look yesterday's. What we thought was acceptable yesterday maybe not is acceptable today. I think it's okay for us to evolve. I mean, I hope we evolve as people and as a culture and as a country and as a community. I think we have to keep evolving. And so I do think that, you know, ideas will evolve, thoughts will evolve, people will evolve their thinking of it. So I think it's a good thing. And I think it's okay for people to challenge this. I think nothing's going to change if we don't allow and have tolerance for people to express themselves and express their anger or express their concern or express their empathy or whatever it is they're trying to express. I think we have to let that happen. I think obviously we have to not let it get out of control, but I think it's important in any society. We've got to allow for that kind of conflict of ideas or conflict of views or thoughts. So I think it's, you know, of course, as someone who loves art, I don't like to see any art destroyed that somebody made. I mean, someone erected that, someone made that. But I think I'm not sure I'm a fan of destroying art, but I think I'm a fan of maybe replacing art or moving art to a more appropriate place, or a statue to a more appropriate place where context is more important for that statue, not to use it to maybe influence in the wrong way. It's probably.
Thanks, Jeff. Lee, do you have thoughts about that? What about art and cancel culture? What, you know, and art's role in promulgating and not fighting racism? And Lee, I think you're muted. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you know, art has a variety of roles, obviously, and I think part of what's happening right now is a kind of reckoning in the nation with respect to who we are and what we stand for. And who we are and what we stand for is often represented in public art, which often means, you know, monuments and statues and those sorts of things. And so what we're seeing nationwide is not only an interrogation of monuments that represent the systemic racial inequities that we're all talking about, but also a dismantling of those. You know, we can have an argument about, you know, a disagreement about that practice, but that is, you know, that is what's happening, and my hope is that out of this movement will, you know, emerge a different orientation to art. You know, James Baldwin said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And that's where we are right now. That's where we are right now in this nation. At least most of us are, many of us are. That's where I am. And I think that's where all of us on this panel are right now.
And I think, if I don't mind saying, I'd like to say I agree with Lee. I concur. As a society, I think it's helpful that we're examining these things and we're having these painful discussions, and because they need to be had. I think it's important.
So I have a question for Valerie in 1 second, but I want to stay on this if we can, and just follow up to you, Lee. You know, we talked earlier about the letter that you wrote after George Floyd was killed. We talked about the response, the viral nature of it. We talked in your bio about all the places that you're involved.
Mm-hmm.
As a Black man in Boston and in the arts, what responsibility do you feel is fair to put on you versus the rest of us, in hoping that your letter in the future will have a different tone and be more positive?
Yeah, well, I think, well, I'm not sure about more positive, but I think that I can only speak for me. And that's a mantle of change, of, as I said, being a good citizen, is one that I wear proudly. And it's not heavy on my shoulders. It uplifts me. And to the degree that I can have some sort of impact, even if it's a meager impact, on the way in which people view the world, is important to me. You know, I can tell you this, that I think one of the things that my letter did, I know, it opened up the door for other Black leaders in this city to tell their story. I'm certain of that. I know that. I heard that over and over again, and for that I'm very proud. Now, obviously, that letter was not well received by everybody, you know, and so I had my my detractors, but you know, from some of the obvious places. But I want to be a change agent, and I'm fearless. I'm not fearful, and so I do, and I will continue to do what I do until the day I die, and happy to do it.
Thank you, Lee. We're happy you do it too. Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot with a question that was unprepared, but we're talking about Lee's letter, and I think a lot of people here saw it, and it really created so much conversation. You served together in the Boston Arts Academy Foundation Board. You've gotten to know each other. What was your reaction when you read the letter?
It's a good question. I'll tell you this, I read it 3 times. Because it was really had a lot to it. And I was going to just say to Lee before you ask, the question is, I think Lee should take a lot more credit than having a little bit of an impact. I know it had a lot of an impact. I know what impact it had on me, what it had on my wife, what it had on every friend I shared it with, because Lee, I shared it with probably 50 people. And I had a dinner party one evening. We had 6 of us outside, and socially distanced properly, but we had a dinner outside, and there was a whole dinner discussion about Lee's letter, because it was people from different walks of life, different views. And I'll tell you, it was because I know Lee, I was able to really, I wouldn't say I was surprised, but it was to learn what I learned from that letter and how Lee felt about things. And I think that for me, it was eye-opening, and it definitely, again, I don't think I can understand what somebody, in this country today who is of color, who grew up inner city, or grew up, I can't experience that. I want to more understand it. And I think Lee's letter was definitely a helpful insight, but yeah, I thought it was powerful. And I think Lee should take a lot more credit. I hope he publishes more at the right time on those things, because it was eye-opening for a lot of people I know. And I can tell you, it changed how people thought, because I saw friends that thought differently after they read Lee's letter and had some time to think about it. I think people had when they reflected on it, it made change in friends of mine that I was surprised it changed as it did.
Thanks, Jeff. Valerie, I want to ask you a twist on that question. You graduated from Emerson, and you also served the Boston Arts Academy Foundation, so you know Lee, and probably knew him a while back as President Pelton. So, you know, for you as a Latina and a woman, when you read that letter, you know, what resonated with you, and what experiences do you have, and would you share if you were going to write a letter like that?
That's a great question. You know, first and foremost, Lee, thank you so much for writing that letter. As an Emerson alum, I read that letter and literally I was like, yes, this is what we need to hear, because you know why? A lot of our community leaders are scared to talk about, you know, what's going on. The youth, even, you know, myself, can I just say, I'd like to think I'm still young. So the youth, you know, we look to our leaders in the community, and these aren't just elected officials. You know, these are in the institutions that bring us, you know, academics and the arts everywhere. And when I read Lee's letter, I was just so proud of that moment to say, number one, I know Lee. Number two, everything he said resonated with me as a Latina, because I said, you know what? It was interesting to read that. I believe, Lee, was it your son who said, you know, who cares what people think if you write the letter? You know, those who get it will get it, and those who don't, well, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. I got it. I got that letter. I was reading Lee's experiences that he was detailing. I mean, what even, you know, I thought of was, these are Lee's experiences that he's sharing with us to illustrate, you know, his experience as a Black man, even just saying as a leader in Boston, here's what I can share with you. And like we were talking about the power of stories, his story hit me. I mean, I even thought about, you know, as I was reading Lee's experience, I think it was in a back alley in Kansas, Lee, that you had to order food from a restaurant, right? You guys, this was 10 years after the civil rights movements, and you still couldn't walk into the restaurant. I said, wow, I mean, that's incredible. That wasn't even that long ago. I even thought of my own instances of experiencing racism. I think I was 10 years old in a predominantly white elementary school, and out of nowhere, I was eating lunch, and a white boy came and literally opened a can of dog food, dumped it on my tray, and said, "Go back to Mexico, you Chihuahua." And I was 10 years old. I didn't even know how to react. But, you know, you learn from these experiences, and you hope that in sharing your stories, what do they say? You turn your mess into a message. And for me, you know, in hearing Lee's perspective on what's going on, and just knowing him, I said, this is what we need to do. And I hope more people come out and speak against everything that's going on if they truly believe it. So thank you, Lee, for writing that.
Hey, Sandy, if I may, I'd like to take the focus a little different direction. And I want to come back. You may. I want to come back to something that you kind of references, that is, you know, I think gets in the way of our understanding. So racism, bigotry, significant issues. But when we talk about systemic racism and inequities, those are not the same thing. One can be a matter of heart or mind. The other has to do with structural, have to do with equities that are built in the very structure of this grand experiment that we call American democracy. And it prevents Black and brown folks and other underrepresented groups from participation in this democracy. So I just want to, you know, we know that nationwide, the net worth of a typical white family is nearly 10 times greater than that of a Black family. In Boston, the net worth of a white family is $247,000, and for a Black family, it's $8. We know that white workers on average routinely bring home a higher hourly wages than their Black and Latinx counterparts, Latinx counterparts, and that this disparity has not gotten smaller. It has actually grown larger over the last 2 decades. And since the Great Recession, as we call it, the gap between Black and white ownership rates in the United States has increased to this highest level in 50 years. We also know that despite these, significant advances in diagnosis and treatment of most chronic diseases, folks of color tend to receive lower quality of care, and that patients of color experience greater morbidity and mortality from these chronic diseases. This is what we ought to be talking about. And in my view, it's those structural inequities that gave Officer Chauvin the license to put his knee on a Black man's neck until he was dead. And I just want to make sure that we make those distinctions between racism and bigotry and these structural inequities. They're related, obviously, but they're not the same. And my focus is on both, but particularly on the latter. And that's what has to change.
We have, this is actually a perfect time to pivot to a couple of the questions that were in the Q&A. And Lee, thank you for leading us in that direction. It's a perfect segue. So I know you didn't intend it, but what you're talking about is so important, the systemic issues. I'm going to take a question up from Tyrone. And Tyrone says, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI knew years ago the connection between art and social movements, which is why they worked so hard to break the unified chain between Black artists like Langston Hughes and James Baldwin and the civil rights movement. Black artistry is a threat to white supremacy because it gives people the opportunity to imagine a world outside of whiteness. I'm curious if there is an artistic work that has either made you uncomfortable or inspired your work in dismantling systemic racism. That's for everybody.
For me, it's James Baldwin. And I keep James Baldwin next to me at my bedside. And sometimes I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I'll reach over and read what he has to say. And I've read just about everything. But I read it over and over again because he was so on point. So on point. For me, it's just, it's Mr. Baldwin.
Do you want to be specific in some of the things that you've read that have most inspired you by James Baldwin? I think maybe some of our attendees here tonight might want to put it next to their own bedsides.
Well, The Fire Next Time, those essays, everybody ought to have a copy of that. And then I'd also say that Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, that ought to be required reading for everybody who can read, quite frankly. And so those of you who have read it know what I'm talking about. It's Caste, K-A-S-T-E, by Isabel Wilkerson. She wrote The Warmth of Other Suns, which was also a brilliant book. I think it won the National Book Award and the Pulitzer too. So.
Valerie or Jeff, a piece of art that has either undermined sort of the anti-racism movement and made you realize what's happening systemically, or something that has inspired you?
I think I get actual inspiration from everything, to be honest with you. Naturally, as an artist, we're always looking for ways to express ourselves, and it's in educating ourselves, staying involved, that we find the inspiration. I think a lot of my inspiration, to be honest with you, just comes from watching social media. I know there is this huge, even before the pandemic, people are saying, you know, what's the big deal about social media? But for young people, it's those personal, right, stories that they share on social media that moves me, because when I think of, you know, really commercial artists and entertainers that have made it big, I do give them credit that they produce amazing art. But for me, I'm just more interested in what's going on around me, closer to me, people who are, you know, not putting on a show for money or for an audience, but they just want to share their own narratives, their own controlled narratives, right, through social media. And so for me, just even those daily stories that I see inspire me.
Thank you.
I think for me, I'm for the media space. So music for me, and I won't call it one artist because they're all customers, but I think, you know, for me, music is ultimately the inspiring thing. And it's one of the things also I learned from. You listen to the stories people tell, and it's important. But I agree with Valerie's point, which is, if you look at what's going on in murals and art that's going on in social, et cetera, that seeing what young people are doing, seeing what I saw with the BAA, you know, just the video, the short film that was shown, and the artwork that was shown, to me, that's almost most inspiring. I think the most inspiring thing I saw was something in that I hadn't seen. That I didn't have time to look at. I saw the video before, which was amazing, but I also hadn't seen the artwork before. And there was a couple pieces in there that really got my attention and thought, wow, that really says it. And so it's just, if we look at what, for me, and just to come back to BA, I think I'm inspired by what young people are able to do, and giving people that voice, giving people that ability to tell their story, whether it's in dance and fashion and in music and in telling making a short film. To me, that is inspiring. I love to see the ability and that's one of the reasons I got involved in BA. I came to BA, I was a guest of somebody and met them at one of the honors events, BA honors events. And when I saw what was being achieved by these kids, and when I saw the work they had achieved, I knew that night I had to be involved. I mean, I immediately knew I had to be involved, because I get so inspired by any mission or any organization or any effort that is helping young people develop their craft, learn their craft, be able to try things, be able to, you know, test their voice and test their ability to tell a story. And you know, it's about creativity, but it's ultimately about, you said earlier, Lee, telling that story, allowing them to tell their story. We need to hear their stories. I need to understand what these young kids are going through, what they're dealing with in their neighborhood, in their community, in their home, in their society that they're facing, in the country that they're in. I think that is so inspiring. And I think the more we can do to let that voice up and to help young people get access to the tools or the training or the experience or just the ability to try things and develop, you know, their storytelling. As you said, Lee, their communication skills, their ability to be those, you know, great individuals that they're going to be, and the great part of society they're going to be. So I think that for me is most inspiring. I always get excited seeing what the work the kids have done.
Great, thank you. I have a question I'd like to share from Ashley, and I'm going to ask for just brief answers from the three of you, because I'm taking a look at the clock and I know we have a lot more to get through. Ashley asks, is there any influence you think those of us watching tonight can have over policy and/or legislation that would increase equity and access to arts education and careers in the arts? So really thinking about what you're talking, you know, what you all just said, and where do we go next to ensure that that continues to happen, and that young people know that they not only have talent, but that they can use that talent, have access to focus their careers around it. Lee, you're smiling.
I'm going to speak for Danella. Support BAA. You know, the arts, the foundation raises, I think, is it a third, Danella, of the what it takes to educate young people. The rest of it comes from, you know, Boston public schools, but the rest is from private donations. And I will say without any shame or embarrassment. If you want to help, then support Boston Arts Academy through the foundation. And you can give $5 or $50 or 50 cents, I don't care, but just support the school, because really what you're doing is you're supporting young people and you're supporting the future. And so we have people like Valerie, who go off into the world and do really great things. And so, and we need more Valeries in the world, quite frankly. So support BAA. That's a good place to start.
So after you support BAA, and then you want to get others involved, is there anything you can think about, Valerie or Jeff, that would increase equity and access to the arts and careers? Any legislation, any sort of advocacy? Where does someone go if they want to break out of this webinar and take it to the streets?
I would probably, suggest taking a look at first in your network. Do what a lot of us are doing. Do what you can as you're able, right? If you can't march, join the protests, boycott. If you can't do either of those, make donations to organizations that are leading the fight for causes close to your heart, like Boston Arts Academy. They're reaching into the communities and uplifting the youth. You can exercise, obviously, your right to vote and help other people keep that top of mind, making sure they've done their due diligence in registering and then encouraging them and seeing them through the vote as you're able. Another one of the things that you can also do is support your local businesses and artists. That's a whole intergenerational thing if you think about it, because artists come in all different ages and backgrounds and histories. You can also network, show up to activities that mean something to you, engage in conversations with even new people. But ultimately, what it is, it's stay updated, stay educated on the Black and Brown experiences as you're able to. So that way, what you learn and the different perspectives that you can gather, you have time to kind of internalize and let it marinate and see how that manifests in yourself so that you can share something meaningful with others as well.
Thanks, Valerie. I'm going to go to you, Jeff. I have a question in the chat from Aaron. And Aaron says, talking about race is hard. How does one move from expressing themselves through art, whether visual or performing, to having important conversations with family and friends that may be the hardest to communicate with? Because although expression through art can speak louder than words, it shouldn't be replacing important conversations. And I think you touched on that briefly before when you talked about sharing Lee's words far and wide, but can you talk just briefly a little bit more about what Aaron's asked?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'll tell you, it's one that I've always been pretty able to, communicate with people and be open about discussion. But to be honest, this is a subject where you almost are a little too careful. And I think that, I wouldn't say I know how to have that conversation. It depends on the person, but I think we all have to be willing to have that uncomfortable conversation. I know as a middle-aged white man, I have to be willing to have that uncomfortable conversation. If I'm not willing to really have a better understanding and really hopefully build better empathy and better ideas on how I can, not just not be a racist, but be anti-racist and actually play a part in helping to make systemic changes. I know for me in the corporate world, what can I do differently as a corporate leader to make changes? I think that, I think in general, we all just have to push the edge of the envelope, and we have to be willing to push the edge of the envelope and have an uncomfortable conversation. I'm someone who has those with my family and friends. I'm not, I was happy to share Lee's, email and then talk about it at dinner and bring it up. And sometimes my wife's like, "Are you sure you want to cause such a stir at dinner?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." It's, and I think these uncomfortable conversations have to happen. And I think, and hopefully, we all can force them to happen, because I think, yeah, art plays an important role, but I actually believe if people just talk and understand and spend time and try to get in better experience with what's going on, I think it'll help. And again, if we're not willing to have the uncomfortable conversation, change won't happen as fast, because people will not want to deal with it. They want to put it aside and kind of act like it's not there. And instead of actually addressing it. And so I think hopefully we can have more of those, let's say proper uncomfortable conversations, not some of the ones we're having in society today, which I think are crazy, but I do think it's important to do it.
Speaking of that,
Yeah.
So people are really tired. People are tired about everything that's been happening before and since George Floyd's murder. It's exhausting. It's sad, it's depressing, it's demoralizing. And, you know, all the vitriol publicly in the election cycle is exhausting and sad and stressful. And yet everyone is now in this virtual world. And so we don't have the physical contact with people. So for artists in particular who feed off of the energy of being with other people, for artists who, you know, need to be inspired and are tired, you know, where do they find hope, and how can they turn that despair or just exhaustion into something powerful that can inspire others?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what their, you know, what their art is or what they're focused on. I think, you know, hopefully people are feeling comfortable enough to be able to get out a little bit in society in a safe and in a proper way to be able to interact and deal with more. But, you know, I know it is a difficult, trying time, and it's, you know, for a lot of people, it is unbelievable what, you know, what is going on in the world, and especially what's going on in this country right now, and the kind of debate and dialogue, I don't want to call it debate, whatever you want to call it, the what's happening in our country. I think that, look, I'm not sure I would answer your question, Sandy, quite like that. I just think that out of this pain will come amazing art. I can guarantee you that. I know what musicians are working on. We're working with a lot of musicians who are working on, if I had $1 for every album called 2020 that is being called 2020 as the working title, there's a lot of people doing a lot of work on telling, you know, what stories that need to be told, or emphasizing or highlighting what needs to be highlighted. So I would say that, not that all art comes from pain, but I think that, you know, the struggles, the pain, the situation we're going through, I think it's going to generate art that is probably going to be in the history books decades from now. I really think there's some important work it's already some work that's come out of it. I think the George Floyd mural, that famous mural on the brick wall, I think that is going to be iconic. It already is iconic. It's going to remain iconic. But I think there are pieces like that, but even other art pieces that will become important. So I wouldn't say that, I don't know how to tell people how to not feel the pain, because it's, how do I say that to people who are going through difficult situations? But I do think very important art will come out of it.
Thank you. We have only a few minutes left, and I want to end on a positive note, if we can. So I want to ask each of the panelists, this panel is about race, art, and hope, and we've talked a lot about all three of those, but I'd like to end with hope, because I think, given what you just talked about, Jeff, and what people are feeling these days, we all need some hope. And I'm very appreciative that all three of you are sharing your expertise and wisdom. So take us to that next level. Tell us what gives you hope that we can think about and take with us as we get to the end of our Q&A. And Valerie, I'll start with you.
Great. You know, thinking of what gives me hope, it has to be the younger millennials, Generation Z, and even the, you know, generation after that, like my son's generation, Generation Alpha. They're paying attention. They're out there. They're marching, protesting, boycotting, lifting their voices. For me, they give me the hope, because they're our future, right? The future, when you think about it, it means that you have hope. You know, they can still change. Youth are malleable. They can take actions and make a difference. And they're the next generation of leaders who can break the cycles of racism, classism, and the many other cycles of social injustice. You know, life is really, I think, perceived differently, right, between generations, and perspective is based on experience, and the youth have not been hardened yet by their experience. They're not afraid. And as Lee and Jeff had pointed out, the youth are powerful, and that's what gives me hope.
Thank you. Jeff, what gives you hope?
I completely agree with Valerie. And I tell my 13-year-old daughter, boy, we have not fixed this. We've screwed this up. Her name is Sophia. Sophia, your generation, you got to take over now, and you've got to make change here. This is not happening. We're not getting it done. I apologize to her for not getting it done in our generation. But I think that, look, it goes to your other question too, is if people want to drive change legislatively in the government, et cetera, go vote. I don't want to just play it over, but I have hope. When I look at how many people are showing up to vote, and if you look at the numbers of people who are early voting, and you look at what's going on, and I'm not trying to jinx anything, but if we want the America we all, if you want the America you want, if you want change, we have to vote. It is within our power to change the direction of conversation in this country and what's happening today over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I think that, I hope people realize that power lies within them, and that if we absolutely can do it, we can change what's happening in this country. And I think I'm not just talking about presidential elections, I'm talking about every level of government, and making sure that people realize that this is our country, and your voice starts with that vote. Get out and vote, and make sure everybody is voting, because that's how change is going to start, especially from where we're at today. And I hope it'll happen.
Thanks, Jeff. Lee, what gives you hope?
Well, there was a 19th century poet, William Blake, said that without contraries, there is no progress. And I think that's certainly true. And we're in a time of crisis right now, but the Greek etymology for crisis is change. Crisis produces change. Discomfort produces change. Think about a year ago, whether or not, and compare that today with the kinds of conversation our nation is having around racism, anti-racism, systemic and structural racism. We weren't having those conversations a year ago. And now we're having those conversations in abundance. And I know that those conversations are very hard for some folks and their families. But discomfort is the place where change begins. Change does not begin from a place of comfort. It comes from discomfort. And so I am hopeful that there will be a way for us to sustain the change that we now live in, the change that now surrounds us. It's really like the air that we breathe. And I'm hopeful that, I hope that we'll be able to sustain that sense of moving forward, of making the old world a new world. And then I'll say this one final thing. There is always this tension between what Martin Luther King called the fierce urgency of now. Something that needs to be done immediately. There's a tension between that and continuous improvement. And what we're in right now is going to take time. It's not going to, not going to be resolved by January or next year. It's going to require continuous commitment and dedication and improvement. Because excellence is not about being something. It's not. It's about becoming something. Excellence is always aspirational, and excellence is always about continuous improvement. And so what we're doing right now is navigating the urgency of now with our continuing commitment to excellence. I'm hopeful, given the breadth and depth of these conversations that we're having, that we will stay committed. You know, progress is a long and dusty road, and there'll be bumps in the road, obviously. But it's my hope that we are on a different path, a different trajectory for this country.
Thank you, Lee. I'm going to throw a curveball in. Speaking of excellence, this has been an excellent conversation, and I really appreciate all of you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be the fly on the wall tonight. And you didn't know that I was going to ask you this, but I do want to ask you, you work with the students at Boston Arts Academy every day. What gives you hope?
It's obviously the students, because they are invested and determined and insistent that there will be change. The day after the lack of indictments for Breonna Taylor's murder, we had 150 students immediately in a Zoom ready to talk about what needed to be changed. We've had students involved in every movement over the summer. They're involved in voting registration. They are involved in the city level conversations about what needs to be happening in the schools, what needs to be happening in the communities. And I am hopeful because I'm fortunate enough to have lived long enough to see wonderful students become amazing alumni like Valerie, who are out there making a difference. And I know the students we have right now will do the same.
Thank you. In the few minutes that we have left, I have a little bit of housekeeping. First, I want to thank again Anne and Danella, the Clark sisters, for inspiring this conversation tonight and bringing all of you together. So thank you so much. And then a special thanks, of course, to Jeff, Valerie, and Lee for being candid, being forthright, being here, and providing leadership to all of us. We really appreciate everything you've shared tonight and everything that you do on a day-to-day basis. And now I'm going to surprise Lee and embarrass him a little bit, because some of you may know that Lee Pelton is, obviously he's an advocate for social justice. He's also the only person in the Boston Arts Academy community who has served as chair of the school's trustees and also the foundation's board of directors. Even during the pandemic, Lee has been fiercely committed to BAA while he's had to focus on his own institution, Emerson, and making sure that the diverse, talented students and alumni get what they need to close the opportunity gap in the arts, sciences, and to be leaders, as you talked about. So 2021, which is almost upon us, marks 10 years of Lee's remarkable leadership and service to BAA. And Lee remains committed to the cause. So if you didn't know, Danella and I are very delighted to lead an effort to name the new boardroom in the new building in Lee's honor. And tonight, I just want to ask you to join us in celebrating Lee's leadership by making a donation or pledge that's meaningful to you. We are shooting for a $100,000 goal for the Lee Pelton boardroom. And the boardroom, while it will be named for him, the funding goes to support the students that you saw and heard about tonight. We're very excited about the beautiful new school building, which is scheduled to open in January of 2022. You can visit bostonartsacademy.org/what else? Pelton Boardroom to donate today. And that's in the chat as well. And it's, again, bostonartsacademy.org/Pelton Boardroom. You know, having this room forever and having Lee's leadership memorialized forever for these students, it's obvious why that's important. And you heard from him today. So please make sure that if you feel inspired to respond to Lee's plea to support the school, that we kindly do it in his name and support the students. Again, I feel like a televirtual, but it's bostonartsacademy.org/Pelton Boardroom. And somebody just put in the chat, we should reach out to Mark Cuban for the boardroom. That's a good idea. What I also want to do is tell you who the book collection winner is, and that is Christine Letts. So Christine, the books will be sent to you. Congratulations, and thank you for joining us. And I know that there are more questions in the Q&A. We couldn't get to them all. That's the bad news. The good news is there is going to be a second conversation on this topic, albeit with different panelists. And the next date for Race, Art, and Hope is Thursday, December 3rd. It will be at 6 p.m., also by Zoom. And the panel that is coming together includes David House, who's Executive Director of Arts Emerson. So we appreciate everyone's time tonight. We appreciate the panel. We appreciate the students and the school for sharing their gifts with us. And we appreciate all of you for making time on a cold, rainy Tuesday, but where would you go anyway? So thanks for being here. And this is being recorded if you'd like to share with others. And I know we referred to Lee's letter quite a lot tonight. So we can also find a way to share that with you if you did not have the good fortune of seeing it. I'm looking at Danella. Did I cover it all? I covered it all. Thank you so much. Good to see all of you. Stay well, stay safe, and think about Boston Arts Academy kids. Good night.